Some such experience as this awaits us when we begin the study of literature, which has always two aspects, one of simple enjoyment and appreciation, and the other of analysis and exact description. Let a little song appeal to the ear, or a noble book to the heart, and for the moment at least, we discover a new world, a world so different from our own that it seems a place of dreams and magics. To enter and enjoy this new world, to love good books for their own sake, is the chief thing. To analyze and explain them is a less joyous but still an important matter. Behind every book is a man, behind the book is the race, and behind the race are the natural and social environments whose influence is unconsciously reflected. This also we must know if the book is to speak its whole message. In a word, we have now reached a point where we wish to understand as well as to enjoy literature, and the first step, since exact definition is impossible, is to determine some of its essential qualities. Would you share a discourse?
Yes,
Explanatory
every
note.
literary work is not a literature. When you have to be literature, a literature has two meanings. One is surface meaning and the inner meaning. So without surface meaning and inner meaning, we cannot say pure literature. That is the thing here. And literature is a universal thing. It is not for any class, not for any nation, not for any religion. It is for all. They're going to say. So the third para.
Qualities of literature. The first significant thing is the essentially artistic quality of all literature. All art is the expression of life in forms of truth and beauty, or rather, it is the reflection of some truth and beauty which are in the world but which remain unnoticed until brought to our attention by some sensitive human soul. Just as the delicate curves of the shell reflect sounds and harmonies too faint to be otherwise noticed. 100 men may pass a hayfield and see only the sweaty toil and the windrows of dried grass, but here is the one who pauses by the Romanian meadow, whose girls are making hay and singing as they work. He looks deeper and sees truth and beauty. Where we see only dead grass, and he reflects that he sees in a little poem in which the hay tells its own story. Yesterday's flowers am I, and I have drunk my last sweet draught of dew. Young maidens came and sang me to my death. The moon looks down and sees me in my shroud, the shroud of my last dew. Yesterday's flowers that are yet in me must needs make way for all tomorrow's flowers. The maidens, too, that sang me to my death must even so make way for all the maids that are to come, and as my soul, as too their soul will be, laden with fragrance of the days gone by. The maidens that tomorrow come this way, will not remember that I once did bloom, for they will only see the newborn flowers. Yet will my perfume-laden soul bring back, as a sweet memory to women's hearts, their days of maidenhood. And then they will be sorry that they came to sing me to my death, and all the butterflies will mourn for me. I bear away with me the sunshine's dear remembrance and the low, soft murmurs of the spring. My breath is sweet as children's prattle is. I drank in all the whole earth's fruitfulness to make of it the fragrance of my soul that shall outlive my death. So from the bird of the Dimbovitza, first series. This was the annotated outline. One who reads only that first exquisite line, "Yesterday's flowers am I," can never again see hay without recalling the beauty that was hidden from his eyes until the poet found it. In the same pleasing, surprising way, all artistic work must be a kind of revelation. Thus architecture is probably the oldest of the arts, yet we still have many builders, but few architects, that is, men whose work in wood or stone suggests some hidden truth and beauty to the human senses. So in literature, which is the art that expresses life in words that appeal to our own sense of the beautiful, we have many writers but few artists. In the broadest sense, perhaps literature means simply the written records of the race, including all its history and sciences, as well as its poems and novels. And in the narrower sense, literature is the artistic record of life, and most of our writing is excluded from it, just as the mass of our buildings, mere shelters from storm and from cold, are excluded from architecture. A history or a work of science may be, and sometimes is, literature, but only as we forget the subject matter and the presentation of facts in the simple beauty of its expression.
So it's the significance of literature. Significance of literature, any piece of writing, any story, any description, where there is life, there is story, there is race, there is history, but this must be artistic way. In artistic way, suppose you keep a plate of rice on the table and give it served to anyone, and if the person who is serving is really
Culinary cuisine artist.
expert, he will serve it in another way. So serving the literary world, that is the piece of writing, piece of description, piece of imagination, which has truth and beauty, and humanizing the theme is actually literature. So literature is associated with human life, human style, human warmth, truth and beauty.
Okay.
All things are associated with literature.
Okay. The second quality of literature is its suggestiveness, its appeal to our emotions and imagination rather than to our intellect. It is not so much what it says as what it awakens in us that constitutes its charm in terms of imagination and fancy and emotions, but not the intellect. So when Milton makes Satan say, "Myself am hell," he does not state any fact, but rather opens up in these three tremendous words a whole world of speculation and imagination. When Faustus, in the presence of Elaine, says, "What was this the face that launched 1,000 ships?" He does not state a fact or expect an answer. He opens a door through which our imagination enters a new world. A world of music and love and beauty and heroism, the whole splendid work of Greek literature. Such magic is in words. When Shakespeare describes the young Byron as speaking in such apt and gracious words that aged ears play truant at his tales, he has unconsciously given not only an excellent description of himself, but the measure of all literature, which makes us play truant with the present world and run away to live a while in the pleasant realm of fancy. The province of all art is not to instruct, but to delight, and only as literature delights us, causing each reader to build in his own soul that lordly pleasure's house of which Tennyson dreamed in his palace of art, is it worthy of its name. The third characteristics of literature arising directly from the other two is its permanence. The world does not live by bread alone, notwithstanding its hurry and bustle and apparent absorption in material things. It does not willingly let any beautiful thing perish. This is even more true of its songs than of its painting and sculpture, though permanence is a quality we should hardly expect in the present deluge of books and magazines pouring day and night from our presses in the name of literature.
So there are two striking features of literature. One is its suggestiveness, that is, you give emotion to a literary work. Without emotion, how a theme, description,
Fancy and fiction to enter a new
imagination.
world.
Without this, how a piece of work, piece of description, piece of scribbles become a literature. And the second striking feature is permanence.
Do you adhere your adherence to C.S. Lewis, the
No,
magician's
I'm not adhering
Refuse
to
and
anything.
everything?
I'm not adhering to anything. The
The
thing is,
novels, mystery
a literary
fiction.
work,
They enter a new world.
in if you make a thing literary, that is,
Fantasy.
if you make a thing piece of literature, it must have some quality of permanence. That means it will appeal, and it will appeal ages after ages. So
Okay.
literature has no boundary.
Mhm.
It is appealing for all people, not only for this country, that country. It is appealing for all people. So it is permanent. Literature has permanence in the history or in the world.
But this problem of too many books is not modern, as we suppose. It has been a problem ever since Caxton brought the first printing press from Flanders 400 years ago, and in the shadow of Westminster Abbey opened his little shop and advertised his wares as good and cheap. Even earlier, 1,000 years before Caxton and his printing press, the busy scholars of the great library of Alexandria found that the number of parchments was much too great for them to handle. And now, when we print more in a week than all the Alexandrian scholars could copy in a century, it would seem impossible that any production could be permanent, that any song or story could live to give delight in future ages. But literature is like a river in a flood, which gradually purifies itself in two ways. The mud settles to the bottom, and the scum rises to the top. When we examine the writings that by common consent constitute our literature, the clear stream purified of its dross, we find at least two more qualities, which we call the tests of literature and which determine its permanence.
Taste of literature.
Tests of literature. The first of these is universality, that is, the appeal to the widest human interests and the simplest human emotions. Though we speak of national and race literatures, like the Greek or Teutonic, and though each has certain superficial marks arising out of the peculiarities of its own people, it is nevertheless true that good literature knows no nationality, nor any bound save those of humanity. It is occupied chiefly with elementary passions and emotions, love and hate, joy and sorrow, fear and faith, which are an essential part of our human nature. And the more it reflects these emotions, the more surely does it awaken a response in man of every race. Every father must respond to the parable of the prodigal son. Wherever men are heroic, they will acknowledge the mastery of Homer. Wherever a man thinks on the strange phenomenon of evil in the world, he will find his own thoughts in the book of Job. In whatever place men love their children, their hearts be stirred by the tragic sorrow of Oedipus and King Lear. All these are but shining examples of the law that only as a book or a little song appeals to universal human interest does it become permanent.
So, for literature, there is human in it it needs human, and human needs literature. So
Okay.
literature, actually it is created from the old thing, and we realize newly in us or among us or inside us. So it jolts our spirit
Okay.
is literature.
That's wonderful. The second test is a purely personal one and may be expressed in the indefinite word style. It is only in a mechanical sense that style is the adequate expression of thought or the peculiar manner of expressing thought, or any other of the definitions that are found in the rhetorics. In a deeper sense, style is the man that is, the unconscious expression of the writer's own personality. It is the very soul of one man, reflecting as in a glass the thoughts and feelings of humanity. As no glass is colorless, but tinges more or less deeply the reflections of its surface, so no author can interpret human life without unconsciously giving to it the native hue of its own soul. It is this intensely personal element that constitutes the style. Every permanent book has more or less of these two elements, the objective and the subjective, the universal and the personal, the deep thought and the feeling of the race reflected and colored by the writer's own life and experience. The object in studying literature. Aside from the pleasure of reading, of entering into a new world and having our imagination quickened, the study of literature has one definite object, and that is to know men. Now, man is ever a dual creature. He has an outward and an inner nature. He is not only a doer of deeds, but a dreamer of dreams. And to know him, the man of any age, we must search deeper than his history. History records his deeds, his outward acts largely, but every great act springs from an ideal, and to understand this, we must read his literature. Where we find his ideals recorded, when we read a history of the Anglo-Saxons, for instance, we learn that they were sea rovers, pirates, explorers, bread eaters, and drinkers. And we know something of their hovels and habits, and the land which they harried and plundered. All that is interesting, but it does not tell us what most we know about these old ancestors of ours.
Very good features of literature. And last of all, what we find in literature is its involvement with king.
Particularly the Anglo-Saxon ancestry,
That's right.
who had been